eSquared Online is a presentation of Pepperdine from the Church Relations Office, and we're thankful to welcome you. Todd Clark has been a minister. He has served as a church coach, just written a new book called, and let me make sure I pronounce the title right, Should Happens. It's actually both very funny and very encouraging about getting the shoulds and oughts out of your life. Todd is one of those guys who will preach for a church, Parkview Church in Illinois. He's coaching during the day. He's working with churches looking for ministers through a group called the Sling Group, which if you don't know about them, look them up. Another great organization to come alongside parachurch organization. Todd is also a Southern California guy now. In fact, he lives in the Huntington Beach area, not far from the beach, and I think he even surfs a little bit, which that's the point where I stopped talking because that's just too much, Todd, for all that. So let me bring my good buddy in who's going to talk about reopening and reshaping. Todd, how are things where you are today, and where are you today?
Yeah, it's good. It's good, Jeff. It's good to see everybody. I'm, when I found out all this was going to be going on, I made a space in my garage to work out of. So this is kind of my quarantine home work office, and I put all my books in here and, my workstation. And then usually my VW bus is my mobile office. So I work out of my bus a lot of times, but they've shut down some of the beach stuff. So I just kind of built the bus into my office.
Okay, Todd, the VW bus raises the cool factor by about 10 points. I got to tell you, just the fact. I love that. Where did you find that whole thing?
I was a youth pastor for 10 years and then a church planter for 10 years and then a teaching pastor for another 8 or 10 and still doing that. But I've had about 7 or 8 of these buses through the years. And when we were over at Christ Church of the Valley in Phoenix about 6 years ago, I bought this bus and have just never sold it. In Phoenix, it didn't like living in Phoenix because it's so hot. And, these things are air cooled, but it loves living at the beach. So I'm keeping it. And by the way, I haven't had a haircut in like 3 months. And I'm looking at you. You look like you have a whole crew there on a TV station doing makeup and hair. I've got nothing, man.
Oh, let me tell you, I have a wife that says, "Yeah, it looks good. Go." That's it. Well, listen, let's get down to business here. You threw something at me that I went, huh? I said, hey, Todd, could you come on with all of your connections with churches and your experience and talk about reopening? And you said, wait a minute, I don't know if it's reopening, Jeff, that we need to talk about, or reshaping. Tell me what's behind that and what you're seeing and things that you think may be helpful for the 100 or so ministers that are tuning in with us right now.
Yeah, Jeff, thanks for that. We're all talking about that idea of reopening and have been for a while, and we'll continue to do that. And we've also began to talk about what will it look like when we reopen, so to speak. And so all those words are so loaded because they all mean different things to all of us. And so I really, as you and I talk, I really wanted us to do a little bit of conversation around the idea of, are we reopening or are we just reshaping? Are we reshaping who we are? Because churches have shapes just like people have shapes, right? We're all different kinds. We're all different shapes and sizes. I think Rudy Haygood is on this call. Rudy he's a monster shape. He's a good shape. I love him, but he's a bigger shape than me. And I'm a much different shape than you. So we have different shapes. Churches have different shapes. Churches have different personalities, just like people have different personalities. And so I wanted us to really dig into that. And so I put some slides together for this crew that I'd love to lead us through, Jeff, for just, the next 10 minutes or so probably. And then some time for some questions. And in these slides, what I really want to do is I want to approach a conversation about reshaping, but I want to give you guys some tools for your churches, whether you're 50 people or 200 or 2,000 or 20,000. By the time I get done with this 10 or 15 minutes, I'm going to give you some tools that you can use with your team, with your staff to look at the shape of your ministry. So I'm going to share my screen with you here. If I can do that, I can find where that is.
This is where you show your technological prowess.
This is where I show that exactly. Exactly. Can you see that on my screen, the title slide?
Sure can.
Okay, cool. So that's where we're going with this. And the first thought with this, friends, is this whole idea that, if I can get it to move, there we go. We're not reopening, right? We're not reopening our churches because our churches never closed. And we've said that, we've talked about that, we've heard that even today. There's a lot of things that did close down in our world, and they are not going to reopen in the same way. Hertz being one of those that just declared bankruptcy a couple of days ago. Neiman Marcus has declared bankruptcy, not going to reopen in the same way, going to liquidate. Gold's Gym, not going to open the same way. Pier 1, J. Crew, lots of these brands, lots of these organizations that actually did shut down are either not going to reopen at all, or they're not going to reopen the same way. And the good news is we never really shut down. And so we don't have to reopen the same way. And you see Blockbuster up there in the corner. And Blockbuster obviously is a name and a brand that we know from 10 or 12 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
But Blockbuster, right? It declared bankruptcy, and we can learn lessons from all of these companies and what they thought and what they did, and we can apply that to the church. For instance, with Blockbuster is where everybody had to go 10 or 15 years ago to get their content, to get their videos, to get their movies. And Blockbuster just felt like, hey, even with Redbox coming out and things like that, Netflix starting to stream and send CDs to your mailbox, you have to come to our geography to get content. You have to come to our physical store to get content. And everybody just began to say, well, no, we don't have to do that. We can do the Redbox or we can do Netflix and that sort of thing. And Blockbuster, because it didn't see what was happening and what was changing in the way to reshape who they were, they're no longer around. And I would just say, yeah, we're not reopening. We were never closed, but we have to, even as we reopen or become available to people again, we have to look at our shape of who we are and what we offer and how we offer that and how we interact. I know Barry was talking about that a whole lot on the last conversation. And I want you to just take a look at this photo. If we don't, my guess is if we don't take time to look at our shape, a lot of times our church could look like this. JCPenney also just declared bankruptcy recently, and their parking lots are going to be empty and they're going to be liquidated. So the whole notion is we're not reopening our churches, right? We're reshaping our churches. And so the question is for all of you, what shape will your church look like as you move forward? What's it going to look like? Now, for me, don't throw me under the bus here, but for the last 10 or 15, 20 years, I've been, doing ministry, but I also love just investing and doing different things in the stock market. And as you know, during this season, I'm sure you all are privy to this with everybody at home. Not everybody, but a lot of people have been looking more at the stock market and what's going on there. And maybe I'll get an E-Trade account, and maybe I'll try and do this. And then, we put $50 in an account and lose it. So we stop, right? Because it's just very difficult to do. But I've been looking a lot and learning a lot for our churches. And I coach right now about 30 churches right now. I've been learning a lot from the marketplace that we can apply to the church, from the NASDAQ, from the New York Stock Exchange. One of the big things that you hear all the time on the news or on Twitter or on Facebook or wherever you get your media is, what kind of reopening is this going to be? What kind of rebound? Is it going to be a V-shape rebound? Is it going to be a U-shape rebound? And so I've been thinking about that and have some friends who've been thinking about that. And here's what we've been thinking for the church. Churches are going to have different shapes as they reopen, as we become available to people again. Every church isn't going to look the same. And even every department in our church isn't going to look the same. So take a look at this, reshaping. We know everything will not have the same recovery shape as we settle into the new normal. Reshaping is predictive meaning we need to try and look at what's coming, and it's preemptive. It's preemptive, looking at the lessons we can learn from these other things in other churches. Preemptive decisions on what has or will change in the new normal. So just to outline these real quick, the V shape is what will come back quickly. Programs, ministries, initiatives that will have an immediate return, right, to like a new normal. A V-shaped recovery, return to a new normal in our marketplace, in our world, would be stuff like Facebook has had a pretty V-shape, if you know that company. Chipotle has pivoted. Chipotle had a pretty quick V-shaped recovery. Domino's Pizza, delivering pizzas to people, it didn't stay down for long. It was pretty much everybody got through the scare, and they were a V-shaped recovery. A U-shaped recovery is what will come back slowly. What programs, ministries, initiatives that will be slower to return to a new normal in our church. Thinking about those things in our world, in the marketplace, that's things like the airlines. The airlines have taken a bit of a longer U. There's more of a trough down there. They're staying low. They're not opening up as much. And then eventually they're just starting to open. Or maybe the cruise lines, or even Walt Disney, you see announcing today. So they started up here. They've taken more of a long U shape, and they're just starting to reopen. It's coming back more slowly. The L shape in our world is program and things that will not come back. Programs, ministries, initiatives that will not return to the new normal. In our world, we already mentioned a bunch of those that have gone bankrupt, with JCPenney and Gold's Gym and 500 others. And then the J shape, maybe you're like a J shape, what will accelerate during this? Programs, ministries, initiatives that will start or accelerate into a new normal. So they weren't much of a ministry at all before, or they weren't much of a business at all before, but now they're actually starting. They're getting traction during this COVID season, during this crisis season. Because we know this, right? A crisis season can be a disruptor, but it can also be an accelerator for new things. It can disrupt all kinds of things in a crisis season. We've all seen that. But it can also accelerate all kinds of new things in the marketplace.
Yeah, Todd, you talk about investing. I'm sitting here right now thinking about Zoom. Who knew about Zoom? And now it's everywhere. Let me say to our listeners, feel free to chat in questions, because I'm going to pepper this guy, because I'm loving this chart, but I'm thinking, wow, does this really work? Go ahead, Todd. I bumped you.
Absolutely, Jeff. Absolutely. Zoom is one of those J-shaped recoveries. There's another group called Chegg. I don't know if you know what Chegg is. It's an online education system. Or Teledoc, right? Because you don't want to go to the doctor. Teledoc has gotten huge. Peloton, where we have our bikes at home because we don't want to go in, Shopify, Smile Direct, all these different things. So the question is, for us in the church, what shape is your ministry going to be? And so let's just work through a couple of these quickly. Maybe a V shape in your church could be your weekend gatherings. They're going to bounce back a little quicker. But like we were talking about earlier today, and Barry was talking about, though your weekend gatherings with people may bounce back some, kids ministries may be more like a U for a long time. Because parents, when families start coming back to your church, they're all going to sit together. They're going to want to be together instead of putting their kids in a children's ministry. Or maybe small groups. We see small groups bouncing back, through Zoom and Cisco WebEx and things like that all over the country, because you can get people together quicker, and you can get groups of 10. So what ministries do you have that are going to be more like a V type response pattern? Which ones do you have in your church that are going to be more like a U, that are going to come back a little more slowly? That may be your weekend gatherings. Barry talked about, they've been open for 4 or 5 weeks now, but it's definitely more like a U. They haven't gotten to 1,000 people there, and there's many thousands of people that go to his church. So the weekend gatherings, they're coming back, but they're more like a U. Or maybe your kids ministry, or your volunteers, or your finances, and that sort of thing. What in your ministry is like an L shape? And this is a sobering one, Jeff. What won't come back? You see, here's just my thought and opinion, and you all take this for what it's worth. But during crisis seasons like this, it's an opportunity at times also to reinvent ourselves. And the Bible would call it pruning. Pruning is a very healthy spiritual thing, and pruning something allows things to be more fruitful. So during,
Todd,
yeah,
I got to ask, because I'm looking at that, and in my head, I'm saying, okay, so there are some things that may need to be, what's a nice way to put it? Pruned, put away, expired. But there are people that are connected to those things who are like, wait, we're not going to do fill in the blank. Can you say a word about that?
Yeah, absolutely. That happens all the time, right? One of the most difficult things for us to do is cut things because it's somebody's baby. And every one of those ideas was a great idea at some point. And I'm not saying that you do that arbitrarily, Jeff, but a couple things on that. First of all, sometimes your biggest critics can become your biggest fans if they just know why you're doing it.
Good point.
So
good point. If the why is there. Mm-hmm.
If you know you're going to prune something and you've been thinking about it, and this season makes it even more clear, you would be foolish not to go to the people who are involved in that ministry or whatever it is and explain to them what it is you're going to do and why, or get their input into it instead of just announcing it through some online service or in a program. Your biggest critics can become your biggest fans if they just know why and what you are doing. The second thing about pruning is that I have people who prune my yard and stuff here in Huntington Beach. They're professionals at it. If you don't know what you're doing when you're pruning and you just go arbitrarily out and start cutting out parts of a bush or a shrub or a tree, you can kill the tree. To prune means to cut it back in a way that it can be even more fruitful. And sometimes the same ministry can even be more fruitful. I'm not saying you have to completely stop it, but the reason Scripture tells us we prune something is not because it's bad and it's not growing. We prune it so that it can even be more fruitful. And during this season, I'm not saying that you have to, but think about what things might be an L shape. Maybe some of your campuses just won't come back, or some of the events that you did or you always did, they won't come back this year. You'll hold them till next year. Maybe some staff roles won't come back. I'm not saying you lose that staff person, but maybe you pivot them into a different role. And then finally, Jeff, what's the J shape? What in your church looks like a J shape? What things have started, during this crisis, it has disrupted things, but what has it accelerated in your church? That's probably your online services, your online campuses, your online pastors, your next steps online maybe. I was talking to a church just a couple days ago that on normal weekend, they have 10 people showing up in their next steps class. They run it every weekend. For anybody who's new, anybody who wants to know about the church, they have an average of about 10 people show up for that next step class. Over the last 6 weeks being shut down, they've had 90 to 100 people every week online for their next step
Where
class.
Are they advertising the next step class?
They're advertising it to people who are watching their services.
Gotcha.
So it's right there with an online pastor. When this is over, if you want to know more about us, just stick around, hit this link, and you'll be in our next step class, and we will talk and have a presentation for you and all those sorts of things. The other J shapes would be virtual small groups. We've talked about there's the debate on that. Are online relationships real? I would suggest that they are real. They don't take over physical relationships, but they are absolutely real, especially to the coming generation. And then finally, the decentralized offices. So just maybe making a list of all these things, all the ministries of your church, and then maybe putting them into a box like this. What's a V shape? First Church for us. What's going to come back quickly? What's an L shape for us? What's going to come back slowly? What's an L shape? And then what's a J shape? Maybe doing that with your team, maybe doing that with a couple of your staff or your board or something like that. Maybe just spending some time working through a graphic like this could be a great tool for a staff meeting or for a board meeting. I'm not saying you have to do every one of these things, but it starts to get us in the mind of not everything's going to open at the same time in the same shape. So let's just think about what it would look like for us in these areas. So,
wow, Todd, that's brilliant. I don't know who you stole it from, but that's good stuff.
Let me Grow Mentum. The guys at Grow Mentum, and they'll put that in the chat. Grow Mentum is some buddies of mine who've been working on this. One of the guys, Kay Chung, who I think you know. Yep. We've been sharing this with churches for a while.
Well, you mentioned a line, and it kind of flowed by there, and I'm going to pitch this to you as a quick question. Some minister might ask, okay, this is all good, but How do I get my elders, my group of leaders on board here when they're all just saying, oh, let's just get back to where we were. If we could just get back to where we were. Thoughts about that?
Yeah. You know, Jeff, we're not going to be back to where we were. There's going to be that new normal. And that's going to be a sobering, hard thing because there's all kinds of things and traditions that are good and we must hold on to. And there's other things that we're probably going to have to let go. I would say they're non-essential. There's essential things that we will hold on to, absolutely. But there's some non-essential things in our churches that we'll have to let go probably during this season. And my guess is most of our lay people, our elders, the people in our congregation, they already know this. They're just looking for somebody to clearly lead through this. The reason I share that graphic is because clear leadership breeds trust. When we communicate clearly, it breeds trust. If they just know what we're doing and what we've thought about, it creates trust in our people. And I think a graphic like that at the end, instead of just saying, hey, we're going to, do an L shape on these 3 ministries. And guess what? You get the L, you're the loser. You get the L. No. Listen, we went through all of these different things and we're not even sure we have this right. But board members, what do you think about this? It looks like this is how we're going to come back. Does that make sense to you? You do it with them, not to them, right?
Amen. Amen. Well, Todd, I know that Slingshot and you yourself personally are there to help churches. What's the best way for people to reach out to you with questions or maybe, wanting to say, hey, take a look at what we're doing?
Absolutely. Slingshot Group website, just Google Slingshot Group. You can find all kinds of staffing and coaching there. For me personally, I'm at Todd Clark on Twitter. I'm at Todd_Clark on Instagram. You can follow me or direct message me on Twitter or Instagram, or I'm on Facebook as well. It's just Todd Clark. I would love to talk to you about preaching, about teaching, about your shape, about any of these charts. Jeff, I'm going to send these to you so that people can grab this chart, this PDF
Great.
that I shared with you. So anybody who wants this PDF can just copy it out and use it at their board meeting Sunday night or with their staff or whatever.
Fantastic. Well, Todd, God bless you. As I say, we have not had a eSquared presenter with a cool VW van behind him and rocking the SoCal hair there. So, man, that is awesome. Please give my best to your family. And this is the second time Todd has actually been with us on an eSquared, and he is always gracious to give us this time. So we want to keep your family in our prayers. We've run out of time. We've had some good questions, great presenters, but I want to make sure that the guys and gals online from our churches here in California and across the country hear me say this. The answers are not out there somewhere. We've got wonderful resources on the resource page at Pepperdine at our church relations. There's good stuff, but the answers are in your local church because your local congregation is the miracle. It is what God has called you to. And so we want to be, somebody said, always the bridesmaid, never the bride. We're not here to say, here's what it is for you, but to open up some opportunities. But please know, and I know so many of you by name, God is at work in you, and God is working through you.